Welcome to another in our continuing series of podcasts about the Bickelhaupt Arboretum, located in Clinton, Iowa. As we have said, an arboretum is a living museum of woody plant material, specifically trees and shrubs. That being said, there are collections at the Bickelhaupt Arboretum that are not considered woody plant material, but rather more herbaceous garden plant material. Margot tells us why this is important to have at an arboretum.
Okay, so an arboretum is a collection of woody plants, and yet here at the arboretum we have collections of non-woody stuff. So why have plant collections besides woody plants at an arboretum? Why would you want to have non-woody plants around?
Well, an arboretum, you are correct, is woody plant material, but I think the collections of some perennials and some of the gardens, like our hosta garden, just add another level to the arboretum, whereas in the spring we have that flush of bloom with our crab apples and our spring blooming trees. Then, of course, in the fall we have the fall color, and there's nothing wrong with green. We have all shades of green here, but by having the different gardens, it adds a touch of color.
Okay.
And it makes it, rounds it out and makes it just a little more visually pleasant to the eye.
So we use these more to showcase what we already have in some ways. You can use them as an accent to showcase the woody stuff, but it's also a thing to sort of bring people in and be like, there is this woody stuff, but there's also all these other plants around that aren't trees.
Right. And when you say showcase, so what I think they do to some degree is because most of the gardens, the perennials, are shorter, it fills in that lower level, whereas your trees and shrubs, of course, are taller. We have trees that are 40 foot tall, and then the ground is pretty much, bare or not exciting. So by adding that extra level of perennials, you add another dimension, and you also round out that look, and you also add a little color, as I mentioned.
One of these collections is the Stout Silver Medal Daylily collection. First, let's define what a daylily is compared to your typical garden lily. Think Easter lily or any of those Michigan lilies that you might find around buildings. According to the American Daylily Society, a daylily is defined as a member of the genus Hemerocallis, which has Greek origins as two words meaning beauty, and day, which refers to the fact that each daylily flower only lasts one day. These plants, most recently, have been considered members of the Asphodelaceae family, which is actually a plant family full of succulent plants, such as aloe, meaning they're not actually in the lily plant family at all. These flowers, or the flowers of these plants, only bloom for one day, but to make up for that, most plants will have multiple flowers on each flowering stalk. Many flowering stalks are usually found per plant clump as well, and some varieties will often have more than one flowering period per season, meaning they can bloom over and over and over again as the season goes. The daylily that we know of today has its roots, so to speak, in Asia, where it's native. It has a long history of being used by local people in parts of China for food and medicinal purposes over 4 millennia ago. It was used as much for its beauty until it was brought to Europe in the 1500s. Two main species of daylily were first introduced to Europe at that time, the Hemerocallis fulva and the Hemerocallis flava, or the orange and the yellow daylily, were some of the first that were introduced to Europe. Other species, though, were later introduced throughout the years. They grew in popularity amongst gardeners for their ease in growth and beautiful flowers. They even traveled over to North America when Europeans settled and arrived, and actually escaped and became somewhat invasive in the landscape of colonial America. The daylily didn't gain huge notoriety, though, until a botanist from New York named Dr. Arlo Burdett Stout became fascinated with the flowers. Dr. Stout was born in Jackson Center, Ohio in 1876, but he grew up in Albion, Wisconsin. He spent his early years roaming and observing the woodlands around his home. While he was studying botany at Albion Academy in 1895 to 1896, he became interested in the process of seed production. This interest led him to begin investigating how reproduction occurred in daylilies, which led him to study the taxonomy of the plant, which included importing wild clones from the Orient, and he took and looked into their hybridization, their heredity, and selective breeding. He was so interested in these plants that by 1919 he had obtained seeds from several hybridizations and had made thousands of controlled pollinations of daylily flowers. Unfortunately for him, the New York Botanical Garden, where he was employed, had no real interest in propagating these new cultivars of daylilies. He made an arrangement, though, with a nurseryman named Bertrand Farr, who owned Farr Nursery. An arrangement was made that the nursery would propagate and evaluate the most promising seedlings and offer them to the public at a relatively low price. Any royalties that were paid to Dr. Stout went to a fund at the Botanical Center and to establish an award for daylilies, which was known as the American Horticultural Society's Stout Medal, which was established in 1850. Between Dr. Stout and the Farr Nursery, they introduced 83 daylilies while he was alive, and 12 more after Dr. Stout's death in 1957. He started a huge breeding program and came up with over 100 new varieties. In 1934, he published the definitive book on the subject entitled Daylilies, and has since been known as the father of the modern daylily. Not only did he make major contributions to daylilies, he also wrote research articles about seedless grapes, avocados, and potatoes. According to Betsy Clark with the American Horticultural Society Archives and History Committee. Today, there is a thriving American Daylily Society, which was first established in 1946 and currently has over 80,000 registered cultivars as part of it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term cultivar, it refers to a type of plant that people have bred for desired traits, which are then reproduced in each new generation by a method such as grafting or tissue culture or carefully controlled seed production. In terms of daylilies, that desired trait is most often the flower itself.
While the daylily is beautiful to look at, Margot points out many other benefits that people can have from planting daylilies in their home and garden setting. Many of these go way beyond just the beauty of the flower itself. So, Margot, daylilies are known for the beauty that their flowers have. Are there any other uses for these flowers other than just to look at them?
Well, they are beautiful, of course. The original daylily were the orange ditch lilies that maybe some of you might know as you drive through the countryside. So those were the original ones, and they probably weren't considered beautiful. But with all of the developing and the hybridizing of daylilies over decades, we have all colors, all sizes, all shapes, not shapes, but all so many more to pick from, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They've come a long way in color, in disease resistance, and all that. So that is a big plus. Then to add to that, you can also eat the blossoms.
You can eat the blossoms?
You can eat the blossoms. So it's not like you're going to gain a lot of nutrients or vitamin, minerals from it, but it's really fun. You can eat the flower buds, you can eat the petals or the whole flowers. Really fun to throw edible flower petals into salads. And I mean, in this day and age, especially after the pandemic, when people started cooking more at home, they got very creative. And nasturtiums, there's a whole big long list of flowers that are edible. And in the case of daylilies, there is actually a little bit of flavor difference in some of the different colors of the daylilies. So it's not for a nutritional thing, just kind of a fun thing, or floated in.
It's a slightly higher than a garnish, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, you put it in, it add color, and the people feel like you can eat that too.
Let's call it a gourmet garnish.
A gourmet garnish. But it's something we can do. It's something people don't think about when they plant plants, and then maybe they don't have a garden. They're just planting them there as accent material in their yard, just to beautify things. They don't think that maybe there's a chance that you could actually eat these things as well.
And actually, there's one very, very popular variety called Stella d'Or. She's probably considered a medium-sized daylily in that the leaves don't get really big, the flower stalks aren't really long. So she's probably medium category. Has a beautiful golden yellow flower, and oh my gosh, Ryan, blooms her little heart out all summer long. But a lot of times there'll be different flushes of bloom, and Stella d'Or blooms, and all the time. And you see them probably overplanted around town, and on streets and in parks and things like that, because they are so easy. But Stella d'Or, fabulous variety, probably overplanted, but it's well worth it.
Can these flowers attract pollinators?
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
The one thing with daylilies is they will kind of bloom one day. So one flower will bloom for one day, but there are always buds waiting. And there's always another bud for another day or two. So they're very heavy bloomers in that respect. And they do have pollen. I think hummingbirds are attracted to them. They wouldn't be considered a top pollinator,
No,
but there is some pollen, and it is used by, bees and the flower flies and things like that. And often people think of butterflies and the hummingbirds, but as you know, there's so many other insects that are pollinators.
There's beetles, flies, mosquitoes,
Exactly.
of all things, are actually pollinators. Everybody asks me, what good are mosquitoes? And I said, believe it or not, they are pollinators. The only ones that bite are the females right before they're about
Oh
to
my
reproduce.
gosh.
All
Well,
the other males and all the other mosquitoes are actually out pollinating and doing other things.
I did not know that, so you learn something new every
You
day.
learn something new every day. Daylilies have been popular among plant lovers for a number of years, and for a variety of reasons. From the sheer amount of diversity that can be found in this plant group, to their ease of growing and maintaining, especially for a novice plant grower. Margot Hansen runs us through the long list of reasons and benefits that she tells people about when they ask her about daylilies.
Why is there such an interest by people of daylily?
Daylilies actually are one of the easiest perennials for people to grow. They're full sun. They can handle partial shade. They can handle a little bit more shade, but they're not going to bloom as much. So that's very versatile right there, that they aren't really picky about where they need to be planted. In addition to that, they can handle really poor soil. So you've got a perennial that comes back every year, and it will grow in all types of soil for the most part. It can handle clay soil, might not do as well. It can handle sandy soil, struggle if we have severe drought, but it can handle dry conditions. And then of course the loam in the middle is a perfect soil in my mind for most plants. Of course it's very happy there. So you have a plant that can be in all kinds of light levels, all kinds of soil, is very winter hardy in our location, has very few insect and disease problems, is very low maintenance. What more can you ask for?
It sounds like a very simple plant for anybody.
Exactly.
Even if they don't have a green thumb,
It's
you could grow that and and beautify and use it in your landscape.
Exactly. It's one of my top 5 sun perennials. When people, I talk to people that aren't real gardeners or don't know a lot about plants, it's probably my either number 1 or number 2 of full sun plants for people that are just beginning or don't have much knowledge about plants, because I know most of the time they're going to be successful with that. One other thing I want to add is they're very easy to propagate. So you can, after a few years, dig it up, split that plant, and have 3 or 4 plants. It's a win-win with daylilies.
So there's the ease of planting these plants, and there's the fact that they'll come back, they're very successful, they can handle a variety of different light exposures, they can handle a variety of different soil conditions. They're slightly edible, as we say, a gourmet garnish. Why do you think there's any other interest in the daylilies other than those things? I mean, those aren't nothing. There's a lot of stuff right there that would make it just interesting enough. Was there anything else, though, that would make this interesting for a person?
So they would, in the case of the Arboretum here, we do have the Stout Silver Medal collection. They're kind of a border for some of our different trees. They kind of border. They're nice for mass planting. So if you have a hillside or a difficult area, you can mass plant them, and so that works. And so in some cases here at the Arboretum, they're kind of a borderline woody area part, right along the edge of the wooded area. Transitional, yes, or kind of an understory type plant, just to cover the ground, keep it green, keep the erosion down. Now, I didn't talk about erosion, because if you plant daylilies quite thick and you get a nice carpet of them, they're very good for erosion control.
And for some people, that might be a big thing. If you've got a little spot in your yard
Exactly.
that the soil tends to run, you can't grow grass there, put some daylilies there.
Yes,
And help
hillside.
Yep, hillsides especially if you don't want to mow.
You don't want to mow, exactly.
Every year, Daylily enthusiasts and growers develop new varieties through a variety of different breeding techniques. Each year, the American Hemerocallis Society looks at these different varieties and presents one with what is known as the Stout Silver Medal. This medal is named after the botanist Dr. Stout, who did much of the initial work in plant breeding that gives us many of the varieties that we see today. David gives us more details about the Stout Silver Medal Daylily collection at the Arboretum, including a bit of its history, how it was laid out, and how it will be changing in the future.
We have the Daylily collections, the Stout Medal Daylily collection, which is the top Daylily earned that year by the Hemerocallis Society. And that's colorful during the midsummer months when there's not a lot blooming.
When was that one established, the Daylily collection?
I believe that was established in about 96.
96? What was the idea behind that?
Well, we had a gentleman call us from Bluegrass, Iowa, that had the collection. And he was wondering, Daylilies, of course, multiply. And he also went to the Dubuque Arboretum and made them the same offer.
Made them the same offer?
That he'd be willing to supply divisions if we'd be interested in growing them here at the Arboretum. And he was promoting Daylilies.
Yeah.
He was big into the Daylilies and Hemerocallis Society. And we thought it'd be a good addition. And it's still here today and doing very well. And it's interesting to see. I think our collection dates back to 1950. And we have one plant from every year since then, up to about 2015, I believe. And it's
so when you say it was started in 1950, you mean you have a specimen from that won the Stout Medal in 1950. All right, and then you have another specimen that represents silver Stout Medal winners every year up to from 1950 to 2015.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. And it's interesting because people can stand. We planted them together so you can see them, starting with the oldest, going to the newest.
Oh, okay. So you're giving a sort of a spectrum or a lineage, if you will. You start on this side of the collection and move your way. You're going through time.
Yep. And a lot of people think the first ones, starting in 1950 with our collection, resemble the lilies. They call them ditch lilies.
Oh, yeah.
You see them, they're orange. And a lot of them were kind of an orange or maybe a yellow at the beginning, but as the years progress, you can see the progress that the hybridizers made. Shorter flower scapes that don't blow over or weighted over by the flowers. Better looking foliage. Flowers for years became double flowers. Multiple colors. And just huge improvements with the flowers. Larger. So it's interesting to see, and I really like how we laid it out for the visitor.
Yeah, for people to come in and look and be able to really look into this and see what they could do. Because I'm guessing, or I'm pretty sure that the lilies we have that are in areas like ditches and stuff aren't exactly daylilies. They are in the actual lily family, whereas the daylily is not actually a lily per se. It's Hemerocallis, which is in a whole different family than the lily family.
And all of ours are labeled also, so that, and we have the year that it won the Stout Silver Medal also on the label.
So is there any talk about adding to that, or because you stopped at 2015? So
yes, we're going to add to that in the future. Right now, we're out of space where we have them, and we have future plans for the Arboretum. Our master plan is laid out, and we're going to be moving that collection. So at that time, hopefully, we'll have plenty of more room. We can catch up and continue adding.
Another collection that is located very close to the Daylily collection is the Mercy Hospice Herb Garden. This garden was established as a joint venture between the Bickelhaupt Arboretum and Mercy Healthcare Foundation. David gives us some information about the idea, the formation, and the setup of this unique area in the Arboretum. So, Dave, what is the story behind the Mercy Herb Garden?
The idea for the garden was thought of in the fall of 2002 by Randy Meyer, Mercy's spiritual care coordinator.
Oh, okay.
He had conducted a remembrance service at the Arboretum and thought it would be a great idea if there was a garden for similar reflection.
Okay.
The Mercy Healthcare Foundation then donated a substantial sum of money, which was used to build a wall using anamosa stone and purchase plants with.
Okay.
Randy Dykstra of Heartland Gardens in Fulton, Illinois, constructed the wall. Francie Hill of the Arboretum and Evelyn Palm, Mercy Hospice's bereavement coordinator, came up with the location of the garden, which is just here by the upper driveway and along the walkway coming up from the lower parking lot where visitors park. So it was an ideal location. The main idea behind the garden was to provide a place for residents of Mercy Hospice to reflect and reminisce.
Okay.
In May of 2003, the volunteers from both Mercy Hospice staff and from the Arboretum planted herbs in the garden. The garden layout was designed by horticulturist and garden designer Catherine Newman of Galva, Illinois.
Okay.
There is also a small water feature and a teak bench for people to sit on while reminiscing. And the garden was officially dedicated that fall in the month of September.
So September
2003.
September 2003, it was dedicated. How many plants are in that little area? That little herb? Is it an herb garden?
It's an herb garden, yes.
So most of the plants that are there you could use for medicinal purposes or for cooking or for anything like that. I mean, you can't use them for this, but I mean, it would give people an idea of if you grew this, you could use it for your own consumption uses or for your own uses in that manner.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we started out with quite a few plants at the beginning. There was probably 60 or 70. And over the years, we've reduced it down now.
Okay.
And we've got some in there that get larger, take up more space. But one big improvement we've made a few years ago was on the labels that we have. And these are the same labels that we use. They're black plastic, 2.5 by 4.5 inches. And we design them on our own engraver downstairs. We added, instead of just having the common name and the scientific name and the year it was planted, we added along the bottom a couple of lines saying medicinal purpose they had or what type of use they had for cooking.
Yeah, so both historical uses like medicinally and culinarily, cooking-wise. So
yeah, and we're very limited on how much space we have for that on the labels. So we have to we kind of use the main benefit that it. Typically, most of the time, we use it for the cooking benefit. Because most people that come here know that. But it is a big addition to the label, and a lot of people find that interesting, a little bit of information written on it.
Okay.
And we've actually started doing that with some of the other trees and shrubs in the Arboretum, too.
Sort of add to what they've got and give people a little bit more of a background and things like that.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more of a learning experience for people, whether it's old people or students that come here to learn.
Okay. And so you've downsized it a little bit compared to what it was. What other potential updates, additions, or changes might you be making to that area in the future?
Well, this is an area that's going to be totally redesigned with our new plans for the future of the Arboretum. So we will have to move it to a new location in the future.
And in terms of moving that to a new location, then you'll have to take stock, take inventory, say, okay, here's what worked in this location and why, but we may have to rethink, you might be having a different aspect in order in terms of where the plants will be facing or wind conditions or other things like that, and that may affect how or what you even plant. But you're probably no matter what, even when you move things, you'll still have this Mercy Herb Garden in some way, shape, or form in the future.
Yes, that's the plan.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the herb garden was already established when Margot came to the Arboretum. She was involved with both the maintenance and educational aspects of this unique collection. She shares some of that initial history with us that she has about the collection.
The Mercy Hospice Garden was established when I started working here. So I know it as a wonderful collection of perennial and annual herbs. The back history is it was part of a donation from Mercy Hospital and then their hospice program to just kind of memorialize that program that they have. And so as far as I was involved with it, it was more an herb garden. And what was interesting is we had the annual, which had to be planted every year, and then the perennial herbs that would come up, and some like the oregano just gets away from you. It's oregano and mint are very aggressive, and they do spread quite readily, and that's fine because we would just dig it up and then pot it up and give it to other people, warning them that it has to be in an area that it doesn't overtake other herbs.
This collection of herbs also adds a unique educational opportunity for both the volunteers and staff of the Arboretum. As they explain to us, it allows them to make the unique connection, especially among children, that many of the foods they eat come initially from plants that can be grown in home gardens. They have also been excited by some of the additions that have been seen coming to this area and what they have learned from some of these plants themselves.
There's also the herb garden, and it's fun to tell anybody that this herb garden is this is our pharmaceutical. I mean, we get all our drugs and things from
plants.
From plants.
Yeah,
yes.
Many of the drugs that we take for granted,
yes.
Their initial roots of how we came about figuring out that it was good for you or vice versa, bad for you.
Yes.
Came from because we tested the plant. We looked at the
Yes.
plant, and what I tell a lot of my students, and they're always surprised by this, is that for that plant, it is not a drug. It's a defense mechanism. The plants can't get up and wander around. They can't run away. They are good biochemists, and they create these things because they're getting eaten on oftentimes by bugs and other things. I said, we are just a really big animal that happens to have figured out that if we eat it, we get woken up in the morning, or we do this, or we do that, or it relieves some pain. If you're a smaller bug and do that, it doesn't end as well for you usually, but yeah.
When we take kids to the herb garden, it's not just medicines, but flavoring foods.
Yes.
And so there are things to taste there. But we always tell them, if you don't know what it is, don't eat it.
Don't go.
It comes in a plant.
Yeah.
It's not in a bag.
As well as a lot of their spices and stuff
Yeah.
they use in their kitchen, all those kind of things, oregano, basil, rosemary, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
A lot of them say, well, that comes in the spice jar. That's where it comes from. That's where when you get it, you put it on your thing. You don't realize that before it got to that jar, it was a leaf, it was a stem, it was this, it was that. It had to be dried, processed. And
So the volunteer teachers, some of them would say, well, do you like oregano? And the kids, kind of deer in the headlight look. It's like, we don't know what you're talking about. And then you would say, well, do you like spaghetti or do you like pizza? Yeah. And it's like, well, where do you think some of that flavoring comes from? This goes in spaghetti sauce or this goes in pizza sauce. And then they're okay with it, and then some will try it. So that's kind of fun because, like you said, they think it comes in a jar, from the store. And so it's just fun to really get that, that take from them, and some will try it.
and make those connections as well. And
Right.
have them look at things in a different, sort of a different light, if you will.
Where stevia comes from.
You
We had stevia
Yes,
plants.
we had it.
And now I use stevia instead of real sugar in all my cooking.
Yeah, that was exciting when we got it at first, and nobody else knew about it. The Japanese were using it, but we weren't. But now you can get it in jars and all this stuff. But we had the first plants here. I mean, not the first plants, but we at least in.
For us,
For us,
it was our
yes.
first
Right.
plant.
Yes, and
we
had
learned
to-
from the herb
yes,
garden.
we had the children taste that too, because it was that
Right.
sweet. Yeah.
And any of you listening that don't know what stevia is, it is grown as an annual here. The leaves are 10 to 100 times sweeter than sugar. I don't know the exact figure, but it is a sugar substitute with no calories. So, and it just really became popular in this area, maybe 10 years ago, and now it's kind of a rage, but it is a plant that can be grown very easily as an annual. Just pick the leaves and dry them and use them, and you cut back a lot on the sugar calories.
Children are the only ones that can learn from this part of the Arboretum. Margot explains how adults are able to also learn about where their spices originate. She also explains some of the other benefits that these plants have other than flavoring our food, and some of the other benefits this particular garden can have for people beyond its educational value.
Because we have adults that come, and if they don't have an herb garden or don't even garden, it's like, I didn't know that's what dill looked like, or I didn't know that's where oregano came from. And actually, the oregano flower is a magnet for pollinators.
Yeah.
They absolutely love oregano flowers. In addition to that, I love to use oregano flowers as fillers in flower arrangements.
Oh, yeah.
They're a beautiful lavender little cluster of flowers, and they grow so fast and they bloom so readily that they're great for pollinators. All kinds of insects love oregano. And then again, as a cut flower in addition to being an herb.
And then with the fact that it was a Mercy Hospice Garden, something else that was mentioned at one point, I think by Dave in earlier conversations I had with him, it was one of those things that was sort of put in place as a place to reflect and think about things, and maybe even think about loved ones you'd lost in the past and things like that. And that's another aspect of this Arboretum that a lot of people may not think about is it can be a place to sort of come and unwind or
Right, exactly. And we also, and I think part of it being hospice and herbs and healing, I think that is all kind of, so every year the Mercy Hospice group does come here, and they do celebrate the lives of ones that were lost that year. So it's a celebration of life, and It's close to the herb garden, but then they also release butterflies, monarch butterflies, in remembrance of the loved ones that they had lost that year. So there's a connection there, and it's always very well attended, and it's just a wonderful, peaceful way to remember the ones that they've lost.
So while an arboretum is a place to showcase woody plant material, it can also be a place that people can learn about the types of plants you can use around your trees, as well as plants that provide educational opportunities to learn more about our food resources. Along with learning about the plants that make up some of these collections, it also gives people an opportunity to reflect and relax in an ever-changing and busier environment. I would like to thank David Horst and Margot Hansen for their insight on the history and the plants of these collections, and to the educational volunteers, Joyce Ollie, Raymond Smith, and Marion Johnson for sharing their time and insights with me for this podcast, as well as to Otis Welch for the musical selection.